This episode is sponsored by the Expert Services Directory. Are you a coach, consultant, speaker, or trainer who wants to sell your services to corporate clients across the UK, but you're booking fewer than 5 qualified sales calls from your lead generation each month? Or finding that all of your inbound inquiries are coming from junior employees in firms who just want to benchmark your pricing rather than actually introduce you to the real decision maker who has the buying power to get you in? And you really want to generate real qualified inbound inquiries from decision makers in organisations around the UK who actually have buying power and want to purchase your services as an external supplier? Well, that is exactly what the Expert Services Directory is for. And if you visit www.expertservicesdirectory.com and sign up now, you can generate qualified corporate leads for 12 whole months by being part of the Expert Services Directory, where we proactively market specialist providers just like you to real decision makers in companies across the UK who are ready to buy from external suppliers. And if you use the code podcast at checkout, all caps, you'll also get a free corporate priorities calendar that you can use to understand exactly what decision makers are prioritizing at each point in the year so that you can create solutions that sell all year round as well. All you have to do is visit www.expertservicesdirectory.com and enter the code podcast, all in capital letters, at the checkout now. Right, let's get back to the episode. Welcome to the Selling to Corporate podcast, where we're going to be challenging your sales beliefs around selling to corporate organizations and help you increase your bottom line profits every single month. I am Jessica Lorimer, your sales expert and guide in this world of selling to corporate companies, skyrocketing your company sales and making the impact that you really want in the world. Now, don't forget, if you do enjoy the show today, please do head over to iTunes and leave us a review. But enjoy this episode, and I am really looking forward to sharing some epic sales wisdom with you. It is February. Time is speeding past. We are the 5th working week in the year. And I can't quite believe it. I feel very mid-30s about how quickly time is passing now. But it's very exciting. And in true mid-30s, time is flashing past school of thought. I started January and finished January really busy with client delivery, and it was just an absolute joy. So I don't know how anyone else is celebrating the end of January, but personally, I am celebrating the end of January being working with or having worked with 3 different corporate clients on some really exciting big projects for their sales teams and operations. I ran an amazing planning retreat with some of my entrepreneurial clients who came to London from all over the place, actually. We had people come from lots of different locations this year to put in place their 12-month B2B sales strategy and create all of their associated lead generation content and newsletters and ways that they are going to go and action cash injections and things like that. So that was really cool. And then I got to wrap up the month by being in person with our C-suite cohort, which was just a joy, absolute joy. Back into London to deliver a day all around trends, insights that we've learned from 2025 and the B2B sales market, and to focus on the important and integral skills that they need to be using in Q1 to be able to generate the revenue that they actually want before things like the summer holidays kick in, before things like Easter holidays, before decision makers go out of the office, before people leave their jobs, all that kind of stuff. And it was just absolutely brilliant. And it also reminded me that we are 5 weeks in to this year. And I know that that seems like we've got endless, infinite time and possibilities to do whatever we like. But we actually don't. Most people will work 48 weeks of this year. which means that if you're somebody who's working 48 weeks this year, you only have 43 left to create the sales results that you're looking for this year. And if you work fewer than 48 weeks in the year because you are doing other excellent things like taking summer holidays off or traveling or spending time with family, you have fewer than 43 weeks left of this year to be able to create the sales results that you want. And I think that's motivational slash terrifying. So if you have seen January whiz past and you've been focusing on things like creating your website, updating your LinkedIn profile, mapping out your new offer stack, deciding what you're going to charge this year, all of that kind of stuff. Not saying that it's not or can't be useful, but I am saying it's not integral to your sales process. Then you really need to make the most of February and treat it like a new sales year or a sales new year. So if you're not already doing that, please make sure that you do, because otherwise you're going to get to the end of this year and have the same or worse results than last year, and nobody wants that, okay? And the reason I say the same or worse results is, again, never to scare anybody, but because we are seeing trends in the market from last year and actually carrying over from 2024, which showed that lots of businesses plateaued last year. So they didn't make any more money than previous, they didn't grow, and that a lot of businesses dipped last year. And in contrary or contrary to popular belief, I don't think that this was because of the market, and I'm doing the quotation marks in the air, kind of like when people talk about the man, the man is keeping us down. The market was bad, so we didn't make any money. I think that actually it was a really good demonstration of the fact that people had not implemented sales skills, techniques, and or processes into their business last year. And so people were still faffing about with I'm just going to create a high ticket offer and I've got this 50K offer, but nobody's buying it mentality, or I'm going to do another B2C launch before I start my B2B business, or I'm going to just change up all these other things in my business before I start doing lead generation and before I start running sales processes, which is all fine. And it's all completely up to you. But if you are going to spend that time this year just doing those things, unfortunately, because the market is more full of contractors than ever before, more full of people who have been moved out of organizations due to restructures, who are consulting for organizations and actually going back in some cases to the organizations they were working with to consult there, you're not going to catch up. So you need to embrace that speed, that movement, that agility in your sales process and really hone your craft, because otherwise this year you will see a very rapid change in your sales results, and that is much more difficult to navigate. In today's episode, we're talking about network and this idea that your network in some way creates your net worth, and whether or not that's still relevant, because obviously the original adage for that comes from a relatively long time ago. But also, if it is true, what is happening? Why are people leveraging or not leveraging their networks to support some of their B2B sales activity? All right. Now, one of the things that I will caveat before we dive into the meat and potatoes of this episode is that warm contacts and warm networks will only get you so far. And it's really disheartening for me because I spend a lot of time talking to business owners who are probably 2 years in to their business. That's when it typically happens. So business owners who are about 2 years into the business and they'll say to me, oh, Jess, when I started my business, I came out of the corporate world, or I came out of the commercial environment, or, had a huge social network and I started my business and it was so easy. I made 150K or 200K straight off the bat because I just, I had all these like warm recommendations and warm referrals and warm leads. And then, I didn't have time to do any kind of pipeline development. I didn't do any cold lead generation because I didn't need to. And now I don't have anything in my business. Those warm leads, they're gone. There's nothing else coming from them and I don't know what to do now. So this isn't an episode to say, great, if you've got connections and contacts in your life, you will never need to do business development. Far from it. It is an episode to say that you absolutely can make your network work for you if you're prepared to do the right things and to do it in a consultative, relationship sustaining kind of fashion rather than something that's clumsy, awkward, and scuppers your sales and relationships with that person for good. But it's also to say that you must focus on building your cold leads and building your database and building your pipeline. Because if you do not, the risk is not that you might end up in a position where you don't have any cold leads and you don't have any sales calls and you don't have any pipeline because all of your warm leads have been used up. It is to say that you will experience that issue. And when it hits, you will be in a position in your business where you are quite likely to already be investing in expensive kit, where you've got people to pay, maybe where you've brought associates on to do some delivery. And so when that piece hits where you don't have a pipeline and you don't have any leads coming in, that, instead of it being at the start of your business when you kind of expect it to be a little bit wonky, that is going to hit you like a steam train. And suddenly your business is going to feel like you are the proverbial Sisyphus trying to push a huge rock up a hill and wondering why it's suddenly hard and it's not easy, and not being able to invest the time, the money, the energy to learn how to do things properly so you can build that pipeline back up. So that's my caveat for this episode. It's not to say that your network is naff and having it is pointless. It is to say, though, that you need to be doing best practice business development alongside having a network that you leverage in the right way. Otherwise, you will get to a point in your business where suddenly you have no revenue, no pipeline, and it is really difficult. Okay. Now, obviously, we are 5 weeks into this year already, which I feel like I've mentioned about 1,000 times. Um, so if you have not started your lead generation for 2026, if you've not done any proactive lead generation or any kind of sourcing to help support inbound lead generation this year, you are going to have a problem very, very soon, because we are steaming into holiday season. Easter will come up at the end of Q1. Then we'll have summer holidays and decision makers will be out of the office. Then we'll have, the kind of September being the best time to sell to corporates. But if you didn't do any lead generation and pipeline development before it, you're not going to be able to maximize it. And before you know it, we're in February 2027 and things still feel the same. Okay, so if you have not done lead generation yet, you must do it. You must do something about it before the end of March. Otherwise, it's going to be far too late for you to leverage and develop a lot of those leads in time for that September being the best time to sell to companies, period. All right. So if you are somebody who at the moment is listening to this and thinking, oh yeah, but Jess, I just need to get this other launch out the way first, or I'm really busy with delivery and then I'm going to prioritize it, or I just need to sort out the corporate page on my website or create my new offer or figure out the branding for my corporate brand, like whatever it is, don't think about that. Think about, am I actively taking charge and ownership of my sales process? And if I don't have leads today, in 90 days' time, am I going to have leads to leverage? Am I going to have a pipeline? And the answer will be no. And then you will wish that you've done it now. So take it as the reminder that it is. And if you haven't started your proactive lead generation yet, and you know that you are too busy at the moment with delivery or with whatever else is more important than your lead generation, then make sure that you check out the Expert Services Directory. You can use the code podcast at the checkout and it'll get you an extra special free gift that will actually help you plan the ways that you can approach corporate decision makers throughout the year and how you can leverage your networks as well strategically throughout the year. So if you haven't gone and grabbed a spot in the Expert Services Directory yet and use the code podcast at the checkout, make sure that you do, because that resource will be available until the end of February and then it won't be available anymore. All right. So if you haven't grabbed your space yet, make sure you do. As a reminder, the Expert Services Directory is for you if you are a coach, a consultant, or service provider who wants to sell to decision makers in the UK. And we do the heavy lifting for you. When you join and list your self on the directory or list your business on the directory, we actually do proactive marketing to decision makers around the UK so that they can get in touch with you about your services. And that means that we are using the extensive database that I've created over the years of over 16,000 decision makers, which is pretty large, to make sure that you're positioned in the right way so that they can approach you and that you are getting inbound leads from people who are in organizations as qualified decision makers, meaning that they are responsible for your area of specialism and that they are responsible for the budget that would be able to hire you. All right. So if you are somebody who's been super busy in January as a coach, a consultant, or service provider, and you know that you need to generate qualified inbound leads this year, then you need to be inside the Expert Services Directory. And as a reminder, we only take 10 people inside each category and location. So if you are somebody who wants to target organizations in London, we are running very, very low on the ground with people who are targeting London. Okay, so if that's you, if you want to sell to organizations specifically in London, please make sure you go across to the expertservicesdirectory.com/sales or click on the link in the show notes and have a look at getting yourself signed up. Because if you're not, then you are missing out. We are seeing a huge surge at the moment in searches across the site, and we're getting people who are even being approached through all the work that we've been doing around AI search. So they're actually ranking in AI or open source AI platforms for search so that decision makers are contacting them there as well. All right. So if you haven't got a space in the Expert Services Directory yet, make sure you go and do that. And then let's look at your network. The network that you have currently, not the one that you need to create using something like the Expert Services Directory or proactive outreach as a whole. So here's the thing that the interesting line, I guess, that I see in my business when I'm working with entrepreneurs. I work with so many people who are absolute leaders in their field. They're coaches, they're consultants, they're speakers, they're trainers. They're working in lots of different environments, in leadership development, executive coaching, product-based businesses, software as a service. There are people who are working in communications, in marketing, in finance, and in non-traditional business areas around health and well-being, around mindset, around spirituality. So I see an awful lot of business owners every single year. And because I work with experts, I work with lots of people who have a good network. And for the purpose of today's episode, I'm going to define network as being your social or professional contacts. And I think that's really important because over the years, I've realized that, sometimes people can be unclear about definitions. When we think about our network, all of us think differently. And I know that I can ask this question to lots of people I've worked with. I say, how big is your network? And they'll go, oh, well, I don't really know anyone. I don't know anyone who works in this area. I don't know anyone who does this thing. For the purpose, like I say, of today's episode, I want you to think about your network as your social or professional connections and contacts. I don't want you to think about whether they're, quote, good or bad. I just want you to recognize that that's where we're starting. Okay. Now, I talk about and talk to my clients a lot about network because there's that old adage around your network equals your net worth. And I know lots of people who are in my client base who've got thousands of followers on LinkedIn. They've built big social platforms. And I'm talking, I've got clients who've got social media platforms where they've got over 50,000 followers. And it's interesting because I can talk to a lot of clients about their huge network, their huge social media following, their huge newsletter list, their massive database, all of these things, all of their social and professional connections. And they'll say, yeah, but it's not making any money. And that's the first thing that interests me. network, all these people that we know, but it's not making me money. I think that's an interesting thing to consider. The other scenario that I see quite a lot is people who are phenomenal at being generous with their expertise. And so they'll say to me, Jess, I've got this amazing network. I know loads of people and I connect them with each other. And I have calls with them and I explain things to them. I give them help and advice, but they don't buy from me. I think that's interesting. And then we've got the third group, the people who say to me, Jess, do you know what? When I set up my business, it was brilliant. I set up a business one day and within 6 months, I was making 100K. And within my first year, I made 150 to 200,000 because I had so many warm leads, so many referrals, so many recommendations. I just didn't need to do any business development ever. And I always say, oh, and how's that going now? And they say, well, that's why I'm in touch with you because it's all stopped. Those warm leads and recommendations, they all sort of dropped off. And now I've realized that I'm in a situation where I don't have any pipeline. I don't have any contacts that want to hire me, and now my revenue is dried up. And I think that that's interesting. When I say interesting, by the way, I mean interesting in the kind of way that Dr. House means it. I don't know if anyone's ever watched House, the TV series. Would thoroughly recommend. Gets a bit samey, medical mystery, grumpy doctor, eventually saves everybody in the end. But he's not the most emotional of people. And, he'll see a medical situation that most people would think, oh my gosh, this is awful. And he'll say, oh, that's interesting. That symptom is interesting. That's sometimes how I feel in this work that I do. Because people will talk to me about why their sales process isn't working or the things that they're experiencing. And I look at the data and the symptoms and then suggest a solution. And that's what I mean when we talk about these groups of networks that are useful or not, is that it is interesting to me that I work with and have built a community of just amazing, intelligent people, genuine, like I say, experts in their field, who have these huge networks that they're either not able to monetize or that they did, but didn't spend any time future proofing their sales strategy. And this isn't to make anybody feel daft. Just as an FYI, I see this all the time, day in, day out. And it is never a judgment from me when people are experiencing this. But it is interesting. And it reminds me always that I kind of grew up in this sales environment. So for me, the network equals your net worth adage rings true. But that's because I'm not afraid to do the sales processes or have the sales communications and interactions behind the scenes that other people are not prepared to do in order to make the networks that they have or the relationships they have mutually beneficial. So let's talk about that because I think it's really interesting. Somebody said to me a few years ago that they were continuing to work with a client for free and they'd been doing it for over a year. And I said, why? And they said, well, I'm not really working with them. It's not like I'm doing a coaching session with them every week. It's just, every so often they've got a question and I answer it. And then they go away and they do the thing and they let me know how it goes. And then they'll come back and ask another thing. And sometimes if they've got another question that's a bit tricky, like I'll hop on a call with them, but it's not real coaching. I said, oh, that's interesting. And why? Why are you doing that? And they said, because I don't want people to feel like they're a number in my business. I don't ever want to be that transactional salesperson. I want all of my clients to know that I'm there for them. For me, that's an interesting and slightly sad statement to make, because as somebody who comes from a sales background, I think that the perception and sometimes misconception is that salespeople are all these transactional individuals. We only are interested in people to get what we want. And then once we are finished getting what we want, we can kind of sweep them off. We're not interested anymore. And I think that it's patently untrue. I could look at 1,000 examples in my own business of people that I've worked with for 18 plus years, on and off. I genuinely know somebody from when I started my career in recruitment who, even now, I placed this person in a job as an interim. They are still in that job 16 years, 17 years later, something like that. And every year they still contact me. Thank you so much for getting me this job. I really love it. This year I've been, working on this kind of project, or I've done this thing, and it's really nice. And, when I started my own business, they thought mistakenly that I'd started a recruitment business. They sent me details of a bunch of their friends that I could, potentially have placed in jobs and things. And we've kept in touch over the years. And I think anybody who's ever had any kind of interaction with me will know, once you've been a client of mine, I'm around forever. I don't just disappear. But I don't give out services for free. I don't give out training for free. I don't, beyond a course or a coaching program or anything like that, continue working for free. And that's not because I am a transactional human being who thinks, people only matter when they're paying you. It's because I, as a person who runs a business, can only focus my working time on interactions that are going to move my business forward and help pay my staff and help stimulate the economy and all the other great things that come from having a business. So that means that sometimes I speak to people less because I'm having to do on my personal time. And if you've ever been a client of mine, you'll know that I absolutely do that. Sometimes when you're least expecting it, I'm like, oh, I just saw that you did this thing. How's that going, right? That's not transactional. In the world of sales, that's acknowledging where relationships are at and allocating them the time and the energy that you can at that point in life. There are people that I knew 10 years ago who were really good friends. We talk every single day, who now, if we catch up once a month, brilliant. If we don't, well, we'll talk to you in 3 months or 6 months. And at the point that we do, it's fine. It's like we were never not speaking. But it's an interesting shift. It's an interesting, probably mindset reframe for a lot of people who are so worried about being seen as transactional. And it's one of the biggest things that I think stops people having a network that actually does make a difference positively to their business from a revenue or financial perspective, right? And I think that shift around understanding the difference in interaction from a sales perspective and a relationship perspective is important, because it's one of the things that can really lead into the most common issues that we see with people who have large networks. And when I talk about these issues, I mean things like people who are eminently credible, people who've taken the whole, you have to demonstrate your credibility to a whole new level. They've become thought leaders in their space. They're absolutely phenomenal at what they do. They're renowned. And yet the contacts that they've known for years and years and years, just give them a call every so often and be like, oh gosh, we've got this massive issue and we've got this supplier in and it's, they're just terrible. And this person who is so knowledgeable and so credible on the end of the line is like, well, why didn't you approach me? But they never say it. Right? We have these people who are not getting referred to clients and to contacts and prospective clients because they're filling their diaries with these networking calls that they are marking as being, well, this is a semi-sales interaction because I'm getting on this call to catch up with this person, to have a virtual coffee with this person, to deepen my relationship with this person. But they're not making sales from it and they're not getting referrals from it. So actually, what they've done is fill their diary with a bunch of calls that are not leading to any revenue. They've embraced busy work over profit. We have people who are worrying endlessly because their network is not understanding, or they feel like their network is not understanding because they're not buying from them. So they feel like they need to spend ages on their positioning, their messaging, but they're not actually thinking about their sales process and why they're not getting paid. So they'll go almost into this spiral of, if I just change my website, if I just use this one different word, if I just use this different title for what I do instead of this existing title, somebody will understand it better and they'll buy. Essentially, as business owners, we've been kind of conned into the mentality that if we just give real, free value all of the time, that people will buy from us. But it's not happening. And instead, I'm seeing entrepreneurs who are burnt out giving free consultancy and free education to contacts in commercial environments. And by commercial environments, I mean companies or corporate companies who are then not buying from them because they're like, well, if Jess is just going to keep giving me all this free advice and free value, why should I pay her? Because she's just going to do it for free. Or worse, you will give free consultancy and free advice to somebody who then thinks, oh, well, we've got an internal person who could give that a bit of a bash. Sounded pretty easy. And they let them, and it doesn't work because they don't have the same level of expertise. And then they say, well, Jess made out like it was really easy, but actually it wasn't. So she must be a liar. She must be wrong. We wouldn't hire her in future. Right? And I see this all of the time. I see these entrepreneurs who are so burnt out because they're stacking their calendar full of these networking calls, full of these conversations, full of this free consultancy, this free advice, and just not getting anything back. And that, for me, is really sad because combined with the lack of experience with cold outreach or lead generation from a B2B perspective, we're seeing people who are eminently qualified and should be making tons of money in their business who just aren't because they don't have any cold leads filling up their pipeline and they don't have any warm leads, or they've exhausted all of their warm relationships and it's now not paying off anymore. So we're in this interesting, and that is the only word I can use for it. We're in this interesting space at the moment for entrepreneurs. And for most people, I think there was this mindset around 2025 that everything is hard, everything is difficult, nobody really wanted to do more. It felt like a year that was quite heavy for a lot of people. But it's also put us into this position at the beginning of this year where things have to change because otherwise we're going to see lots of businesses who just don't perform, or worse, shut because they didn't focus on the controllable elements of their sales process. So if we take it back to this network and net worth piece, is it worth leveraging your network? And is it worth doing the sales pieces and processes around it to be able to generate some revenue? Of course. Absolutely. Would have been a very short episode if I'd have started with that. Some people are wishing that I had. It's absolutely worth leveraging your warm contacts, your social connections, your professional connections to help you generate prospective corporate clients. The problem is most people don't know how to do it well. They don't know how to do it in a sophisticated way that maintains the relationship, and they don't know how to build their cold leads around it. So they fall into this trap where they're kind of running into, I'm leveraging on my warm leads, I'm making money, I'm delivering lots of stuff. I don't have time to build my pipeline. And then, they end up at the other end of the sphere. So what can we do differently? It's not all doom and gloom. Having a great network is absolutely a wonderful way to help generate some revenue in your business. But it will require things that you don't always want to do. It's interesting because I mentioned I'm watching House again earlier. And I watched an episode recently. I'll be honest, I can't remember the episode, but like I say, they're all quite samey. But there was this great quote in the episode that I thought, oh my gosh, that is completely relevant to sales. And I absolutely need to talk about that on the podcast. And the quote was, doing what you love means doing things that you don't. And I apply that massively to any kind of sales process in your business. Because in order to do what you love, the delivery, the ability to impact end users in organizations, the ability to create change and transformation, all these great things, you have to do the thing that you don't. Most people who listen to this podcast don't love sales. They've never been exposed to it. They've got perceptions about what it means to be a salesperson, what it looks like to be a salesperson. Most of those perceptions are negative. So in your world, doing the thing that you love, that delivery piece, has to come with doing the thing that you don't, which is learning how to sell effectively, learning how to communicate in a sales-focused way, learning how to have sales-based interactions rather than just the kind of nice, vague, warm and fuzzy interactions that you might have had thus far in your business career. And because our network is important, because it's such a great way of being able to generate prospective clients, to be able to generate sales calls, you should absolutely be embracing the things that you can do differently to help your network pay off, right? So if we looked at some of the things that we could do in order to increase revenue or increase opportunities from our network, the first thing I'd say is we can reset boundaries with people. I know that lots of people listening to this podcast will have felt quite uncomfortable when I said most people are giving out free consulting, and I know that will have felt uncomfortable for a lot of people because a lot of people do it. When you're the expert, it's so easy to fall into, let me educate you. Let me tell you more about it. Let me give you just a couple of ideas to solve your problem. And unfortunately, that does breed this environment where either we're training people that we will deliver for free because we consistently are giving out free advice and free consulting, or where we put people in a situation where they then believe it's so easy, they could do it themselves. They try, they find it isn't, and then they blame you, right? If you recognize this pattern in yourself, in your business, it is something that will scupper your sales. So you have to reset the boundary, or you get to choose to reset the boundary, right? And resetting the boundary can be as simple as, hey, look, unfortunately, this is something that my paying clients are investing in. So it wouldn't be fair for me to overstep that scope and boundary with you for free. But if you want to have a conversation about how I can support your organization, more than happy to do that. Let me know when's good for you. Right? You can give any variation of that. I say it to people all the time. I said it to a couple of people on sales calls in January. If you're listening to the podcast, don't worry, I'm not atting you, right? But I find it's easy to be transparent about the boundary and where it is. Hey, unfortunately, this is something other companies pay me for, so I'm not able to give it to you for free, but more than happy to have a conversation with you about the solutions that are paid for and, the remits around them so that you can choose the best thing for you. That's absolutely fine. It feels uncomfortable to say, but it is absolutely fine. It's not a personal attack. It's not something that is saying that you are this awful transactional human being that you never want to help them. It's just letting them know, hey, look, I've given you every piece of value I can for free until this point. I can't give you anything else. Yeah. So we can reset the boundaries with contacts who are getting that free consulting or free education. The other thing that we can do is we can start figuring out what our sales process actually looks like. and whether or not we're being direct about asking people to help move our business forward. What I mean by that is I speak to a lot of people who say, Jess, I've focused on my messaging and my positioning, and I've got this great web page, and I've asked a bunch of my friends to review it. But none of them have introduced me to their companies. And I'm like, great, well, did you ask them to? And they'll say, no, no, no. But I showed them my website and I asked them to, look at the copy on there and tell me what they thought. And I'm like, yeah, but did you ask them to refer you to their company? And they go, well, no, but I thought that they would get it. It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's this idea about miscommunication. Sometimes I feel like what we mean by miscommunication is actually no communication. If you don't tell somebody to do something, or ask somebody to do something, or tell somebody what you want, they can't possibly know. And it's interesting because I met my husband in my 30s. So I met him when I had turned, I was just about to turn 31. Look at me remembering. But I met Owen when I was just about to turn 31. And it was interesting because I'd been in relationships before, obviously. And in those relationships, I thought I had to show up as the kind of version of myself that somebody would want to be in a relationship with. Now, obviously, if you're listening to this and you hit your 30s at any point, you'll know that you kind of get to your 30s and you think, oh, sod it. I am who I am. And if people don't like it, that's cool. But we are now. And so I met Owen and, I was quite clear about the fact I don't really cook. I get these boxes. I get Gusto boxes if you're in the UK. I don't get them anymore because Owen cooks, but I used to get these boxes and I would make whatever was in them. And if I'd forgotten to order them that week, I'd just make like cheese on toast or cereal or something else because I don't cook. And, I would explain I'm somebody who's a sayer. If I don't like something, I just say, because I used to in my 20s not like something. And then, and I'm going to be clear and specify, in personal relationships, I would not like something. And then I would just seethe about it. I wouldn't tell people. I wouldn't be like, hey, you did this thing, it really annoyed me. Because I would sit and think, well, that person might be upset about it. Maybe they would feel bad. Oh, it probably wasn't that big a deal. And, whatever. But I would sit and resent it. And I would seethe about it. So when I met Owen, I said, look, if you do something that irritates me or that I'm upset by, I'm just going to say. And if that upsets you, then that's something that we have to discuss and that we have to live with, right? Either you did upset me and you deserve to feel bad when I say about it and you should apologize, or you did something, it was inadvertent, we discuss it and we move on. That was a difficult conversation. And it was a difficult conversation for me as somebody who arguably has had more difficult sales conversations in their life than any other kind. But it was a big deal because it was something that I was invested in. And so I know that when you are listening to this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, but I would feel so uncomfortable saying to somebody, can you do this thing for me? Can you make this introduction? Can you make this referral? Because what if they said no? What if they just didn't reply? What if they rejected me? What if? I completely understand. I completely empathize. But if we don't tell people what we want or how they can help, and we expect them to miraculously understand and do, we don't always get the outcome that we want. And for a lot of people who are listening to this, who've got these huge networks that aren't really paying off, well, that's one of your problems. If you're not asking people in your network to help you, it is going to be more tricky. People are busy. They have their own things going on. They don't have time to monitor what's going on in their life, in their work, and then what's going on in your business and what you might need. So that's the second thing we can do is we can be direct in our communication. We can ask for what we want. And as adults, we can also accept that if that person doesn't want to do that thing, we have to let that go. It's not a personal slight. Maybe somebody just doesn't feel like they've got the influence in their organization to, try and introduce you. Maybe they being kind, and they just don't think their organization has room for what you do. We have to be clearer in our communication, both in what we ask from others and what we communicate to others, but also in how we take feedback and how we take the answers that we get back from it. Yeah. And the third thing is that we need to figure out our own mindset around what's important to us. I think that the internet at large is very good at telling us, you should be you should be giving tons of free value every single day, because if you build it, they will come. You should be demonstrating your credibility and making sure that you've got lots of letters after your name and hundreds of case studies and testimonials and working for free so that you can eventually get people to pay you. You should be doing X and Y and Z, and it's just not working for a lot of people. So we have to start thinking about our own mindset around what we're being taught by the internet. If we're leveraging our networks, we're being transactional. If we're not giving out free consulting, then we're not giving value. If we're not going and getting, doing lots of work for free so that we can get some case studies, then we lack credibility. These are just inherently not true. As a junior salesperson, when I started out in recruitment, I'd never hired anyone before. Like, the only interview processes I'd ever been through were for jobs that I'd had. And believe it or not, there was not a massive interview process to learn how to sell jewelry, or even to learn how to interview for a job in recruitment. It just wasn't a huge deal. Suddenly I was thrown into this world where I was interviewing people who were working on vastly, vastly important projects in the public sector, who were going to change the way that things like the NHS operated, who were going to change the way that humans were interacting with computers at key locations, hospitals, schools, universities, important things. I'd never done anything about computing. I had C# for Dummies in my desk drawer. I didn't know anything about it, so I had no credibility. I didn't have a master's in recruitment. I didn't have case studies of thousands of candidates that I placed, because I hadn't. But what I did learn, and what I did have drilled into me at companies that I worked for, was that what matters is your sales process, how you run your sales calls, the questions that you ask, the way that you set boundaries, the way that you manage expectations, whether or not you do the things that you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do them. There are things that matter far more than give free value, build it and they'll come, demonstrate your credibility. These things are easy ways for people to sell courses to you on the internet, because they don't want to touch your sales process. And rightly so. People who don't understand how to deliver sales training, or, how to troubleshoot sales effectively, or how to support other people going through that process, shouldn't be selling sales training. But it is an easy way to say, oh, well, you just haven't made enough posts on LinkedIn yet. That's why you haven't made any sales. Not realizing that actually posting on LinkedIn or creating articles or anything like that isn't a sales activity. It's not that they're bad people. It's not that they're telling you to do the wrong thing, but sometimes we have to understand what activity in our sales process is designed to produce what kind of result. Lead generation activity, for example, proactive lead generation activity, is designed to book qualified sales calls. Qualified sales calls, meaning ones that are held with qualified decision makers, are not networking, catch-up virtual coffee calls, are designed to produce proposals. Proposals are designed to produce sales. Unfortunately, we're in this kind of world where we're trying to replace the sales process and key sales activities with things we're more comfortable with. And that is not always going to have the result that you want. So understanding what classifies as a revenue generating activity in your business and doing them, and understanding what isn't a revenue generating activity but may be important or may feel comfortable, and understanding what it will achieve, these things are really, really integral to the way that you run your business. And they're integral to helping you leverage your network correctly. Because if you're spending all of your time writing articles on LinkedIn or, writing posts on social media and hoping that your network sees them and is thinking, oh my gosh, we should book in an actual sales call and pay Jess for her expertise, instead of thinking, oh, cool, like Jess is posting a lot on Facebook, you might be disappointed. Okay. So if you're thinking about resetting your relationships with your network, please make sure that you think carefully about why your network is not being leveraged in the way that you want, or why it's not producing the outcome that you would currently like. So if it is that you've got this huge network, you're super qualified, you're somebody who is really generous with your time with others, you're always networking others so that they can build relationships effectively and all of that kind of thing, but you yourself are not generating profit from it, get in touch. It's time that you had a little bit of a reset, and I can refer you to resources that can help you do that, and certainly help give you a little bit of a jig along the way into making sure that you've got a productive network that are paying off. All right. Like I say, if you are not generating leads yet, or you need to generate more leads, make sure you check out the Expert Services Directory. We are limited on places, particularly in London, for suppliers. So if you have not grabbed your spot in that yet, make sure you go to expertservicesdirectory.com/sales, sign yourself up and use the code podcast at checkout to get your free gift as well. I'll see you in the next step.